John Bannon, and Maria Cavalcante, thank you, and rest in peace.
In the high desert of southern Utah lies a spectacular landscape carved by the power of water and wind. More than 2,000 arches etched from solid sandstone are the red heart of Arches National Park. The extraordinary sculptures have inspired visitors for more than 8,000 years. But in this unforgiving land, nothing lasts forever. This is Arches, the most fragile of America's national parks. There are 5 remarkable national parks in southern Utah. One of the smallest, Arches, covers an area of only 76,000 acres, but is home to some of the most iconic landscapes in America. Arches National Park has more natural arches than anywhere else in the world. Over 2,000 geological marvels carved from the red Entrada sandstone. The most spectacular features have been given names. Some, like the double arch, delicate arch, and balanced rock, are good descriptions of the sandstone sculptures. Others, like the Devil's Garden, Fiery Furnace, and Dark Angel, reflect the pioneering settlers' attitude to the dry and desolate desert. The arches range from monoliths spanning 300 feet down to fragile structures only 3 feet wide. It takes 2 days to walk the length of the national park, but it would take years to explore all the arches. Pioneering settlers once thought the arches must have been carved by some lost culture, the desert equivalent of England's Stonehenge. But the sculptures in this rock garden were millions of years in the making. The dramatic view through the north window arch is also a window into the ancient past. The same tectonic forces that once thrust this sandstone plateau 1 mile into the sky also gave birth to one of the greatest river systems in North America, the Colorado. From Dead Horse Point, it's possible to witness 10 million years of erosion, the river having etched out nearly a mile of vertical rock, exposing layer after layer of soft sandstone. Stacked like pages of an immense geology textbook, the history of the land is written in the walls of the canyons. But reading the layers required a truly remarkable explorer. In 1869, John Wesley Powell, a 35-year-old professor of natural history, ventured into the last unknown area of the continental United States and brought to an end the era of Western exploration. Back then, even the local Native American tribes thought it was impossible to navigate the treacherous rapids of the Colorado River. But despite stories of massive whirlpools and huge waterfalls, Powell was undeterred. Not even the loss of one arm, amputated during the Civil War at the Battle of Shiloh, would stop Powell from completing a voyage that covered almost 1,000 miles through uncharted canyons, changing the West forever. Returning as a national hero, Powell promptly hit the lecture circuit and raised funds for a second expedition in 1871. His first trip down the Colorado was so perilous and so brief, his questions about the geology of the land remained unanswered. So on his second journey down the Colorado, he took a surveyor and a photographer. Powell planned his second voyage to take a year and a half, allowing plenty of time to produce what the first trip did not: a map and scientific publications. Since Powell only had one arm, he couldn't row, so he sat perched on an armchair strapped on top of his boat. The increased elevation gave Powell a better view of oncoming rapids and the many other perils of the Colorado River. Strangely enough, Powell always maintained he was not an adventurer or even an explorer. He believed he was a scientist, motivated by a thirst for knowledge. Powell wanted to prove a radical theory. He believed erosion had slowly sculpted the canyons of the Colorado. At the time, many European geologists still believed the Earth was less than 10,000 years old. So, Powell headed back down the river to collect the geological samples he needed to prove his theory. But even with his previous experience, navigating the Colorado in wooden rowboats wasn't easy. At every rapid, Powell and his team would unload the boats and carry them along the bank or lower them by rope through the rapids. Whenever they stopped, the one-armed Powell would go exploring high into the cliffs, collecting the geological samples that proved his theory about the erosive power of the Colorado River. For nearly 50 years after Powell's epic voyage, the spectacular landscapes carved by the Colorado remain virtually deserted. The scenic wonderland that would become Arches National Park was incredibly isolated. Today, it's hard to imagine the difficulties of traveling through the desert. Roads are well paved and well signposted, and in the unlikely event of an accident, assistance is just a phone call away. But once, this land was true wilderness. The first automobiles didn't roll their way into the area until the mid-1930s. Before then, access was on horseback, or later by catching a stagecoach from the nearest railway over unreliable roads. The 35-mile journey took 12 hours of dusty, uncomfortable, bone-jarring jostling. In those days, it took a special kind of tourist to travel to southern Utah for a summer vacation. The area finally received national attention in 1929, when President Herbert Hoover signed the legislation creating Arches National Monument. But even after significant roadworks in 1947, fewer than 5,000 visitors a year risked the route into Arches. But things are very different today. In 2009, almost 1 million people made the trip through the desert. Arches became a national park in 1971, when Congress recognized over 10,000 years of cultural history that flourished in the spectacular landscape of sandstone arches and canyons. But the geological history of Arches National Park began 300 million years ago.
This month on 3Net, see the world in 3D as only IMAX can show you. Galapagos brings you closer than ever before to the place where land's oldest reptiles meet the mammals of the marine and one of the last pristine places on Earth. L5 launches you into the future, to a city in outer space where humans will live in and travel throughout our very own solar system. NASCAR puts you in the driver's seat for the heart-pounding 3D thrills of America's most popular spectator sport. And T-Rex takes you back 65 million years for a prehistoric adventure that brings you face to face with the fiercest of the dinosaurs. This month, only on 3Net.
The island in the Sky Mesa, resting on sheer sandstone cliffs over 1,000 feet above the surrounding terrain, provides a spectacular view of the Colorado Plateau. 30,000 square miles of raw red stone. The plateau spreads out of Utah into Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado. This is high desert, 5,000 feet above sea level, where the summers are hot, the winters cold, and temperatures can fluctuate as much as 50 degrees in a single day. Rainfall is sporadic at best, and life is harsh for the few plants that cling tenaciously to the barren bedrock. Yet for geologists, the plateau is paradise. The rocks that form Arches National Park were born 300 million years ago, when the land was covered by a huge sea. As the climate changed, the sea evaporated, leaving behind a bed of salt, soon covered by desert sands. Over millions of years, the ocean returned and retreated 27 times, building up layer upon layer of salt and sediment. 10 million years ago, a massive collision between the Earth's tectonic plates thrust the entire plateau 1 mile into the sky. And ever since, the Colorado River has slowly been eating away at the layers. For geologists, a journey down into the canyons is like entering a time machine. Water's relentless gouging exposes layers of rock created long before the time of the dinosaurs. The deepest parts of the Colorado Plateau are 1.7 billion years old, more than a third of the Earth's existence. Already, half of the original plateau has been consumed, transported grain by grain to the Pacific Ocean. Given another 20 million years, the entire Colorado Plateau will have disappeared, reduced back down to sea level. However, it's not water, but salt that created the bizarre landscapes of Arches National Park. The distinctive rocks of Park Avenue, named for their resemblance to the high-rises of New York City, sit on layers of salt buried deep underground. Under the weight of all the sandstone, the salt beds ooze and flow like toothpaste. The shifting salt causes rocks on the surface to buckle and bulge, thrusting some sections up into domes, dropping others into cavities. The movement of the salt causes the sandstone to splinter into vertical cracks. These miniature fault lines open the door for the erosion that sculpts the national park's arches and fins. When water seeps into a vertical crack in the rock, it washes away loose debris and erodes the cement holding the sandstone together. In the winter, when the water freezes, it expands, applying enough pressure to break off pieces of the surrounding rock, which are swept away by the scouring winds. Eventually, only the hardest rock remains as a line of freestanding fins. Plants also sculpt the sandstone. Roots of trees squeeze into narrow crevices, splintering the rock, while wind and frost continue to gnaw at the fin's foundations. Eventually, a slab of cementing material gives way, and chunks of rock tumble down. Many damaged fins collapse. Others, with the right degree of hardness and balance, survive despite their missing sections. The fins of rock deflect the wind, funneling air through a small area which increases its velocity. The gale picks up small particles and sandblasts the rock, etching a hole into the softest part of the fin, and an arch is born. But the desert is not satisfied with just creating a magnificent sculpture. It also adds color by painting the rock with varnish. The redness of the rock comes from traces of iron in the cement holding the stone together. But many walls appear almost black because they're covered with a dark, smooth, shiny coating. It's called desert varnish and looks much like dark paint spilled over the canyon walls. The varnish is formed by bacteria living on the surface of the hot rock. The microbes use tiny amounts of manganese and iron from the atmosphere to obtain energy and deposit the oxidized minerals on the surface of the sandstone. Many people imagine the rocky desert to be indestructible, but everything here is slow to create and fast to destroy. It can take 10,000 years for a mature desert varnish to form on rocks. The smooth, shiny surface of the sandstone attracted the very first visitors to this land. Over 8,000 years ago, people used the rocks of Arches National Park as a canvas.
This month on 3Net, see the world in 3D as only IMAX can show you. Galapagos brings you closer than ever before to the place where land's oldest reptiles meet the mammals of the marine and one of the last pristine places on Earth. L5 launches you into the future, to a city in outer space where humans will live in and travel throughout our very own solar system. NASCAR puts you in the driver's seat for the heart-pounding 3D thrills of America's most popular spectator sport. T-Rex takes you back 65 million years for a prehistoric adventure that brings you face to face with the fiercest of the dinosaurs. This month, only on 3Net.
The earliest visitors to what became Arches National Park were nomadic hunters and gatherers who walked the canyons in a time before agriculture, pottery, or even the bow and arrow. These nomads of the desert arrived at the end of the Ice Age and were masterful artists. They painted ghostly figures with hollow eyes in a dark red pigment on sheltered rock, free from desert varnish. The tradition was continued over thousands of years by many different tribes. A jumble of rocks near Wolf Ranch contains some of the finest examples of historic rock art in the region. The images were created by chiseling through the dark layer of desert varnish to reveal the pale sandstone beneath. Riders on horseback armed with bows and arrows must have been drawn after 1540, when the Spanish introduced horses to the New World. Mountain sheep appear frequently, as the desert bighorn was a favorite for generations of Native American hunters, including the tribes who greeted Major John Wesley Powell in 1871. The one-armed explorer was fascinated with the Native Americans of the Southwest, and back in Washington, D.C., strongly advocated that large tracts of land be set aside for unspoiled use by a people who were very much a part of the dry canyons. The tribe's system of hunting and gathering was elegantly adapted to their environment. Men brought home big game like sheep and deer, as well as small mammals and birds. While men were the hunters, women were the gatherers. Extended family groups followed the seasons to make the most of whatever was plentiful at the time. The women collected seed grasses, pine nuts, berries, and roots in woven baskets. There was food in the desert, if you knew where to look. But the mobile hunter-gatherer tribes never stayed long in the region that would become Arches National Park. The dry desert could not support a large population. However, the modern tribes were relatively recent arrivals in this dry land, having traveled here sometime in the 1600s. Before then, another ancient people lived here, and they were farmers who built houses of stone. In the 1800s, the pioneers puzzled over a vanished race who once lived in houses perched precariously like swallows' nests on the sandstone walls of the canyon country. Thought to be ancestors of the modern Pueblo Indians, these early agriculturalists raised domesticated maize, beans, and squash, producing enough food to support large populations in stone houses. But then, about 700 years ago, the people just left. They simply walked away from their settlements and went south into New Mexico and Arizona, leaving behind cooking pots and baskets. It's thought their expanding population could have exceeded the limits of the dry land's capacity. It was a time of extreme weather, culminating in a 30-year drought. Over the centuries that followed, many others would be driven off the land by the extreme conditions in Arches National Park.
This month on 3Net, see the world in 3D as only IMAX can show you. Galapagos brings you closer than ever before to the place where land's oldest reptiles meet the mammals of the marine and one of the last pristine places on Earth. L5 launches you into the future, to a city in outer space where humans will live in and travel throughout our very own solar system. NASCAR puts you in the driver's seat for the heart-pounding 3D thrills of America's most popular spectator sport. And T-Rex takes you back 65 million years for a prehistoric adventure that brings you face to face with the fiercest of the dinosaurs. This month, only on 3Net.
Back in the 1800s, when trains began steaming across the American continent, railroad owners and politicians all had an interest in promoting the West as an agricultural land, just waiting for the plow and homesteaders. But the one-armed Civil War hero, Major John Wesley Powell, had traveled extensively through the empty lands. Powell was the only prominent scientific voice reminding the public that the deserts of the Southwest were not really suited for agriculture. But that didn't stop people from trying. One settler even found a beautiful spot within what is now Arches National Park. John Wesley Wolfe, a veteran of the Civil War, built the homestead known as Wolfe Ranch around 1898, seeking good fortune in the newly established state of Utah. The cabin remains, an echo of what must have been a remarkable experience. Land was cheap, grass was free, and there was a growing demand for beef in the east. So, in complete isolation, Wolfe grazed more than 1,000 head of cattle among the desolate Arches. But after 2 lonely decades of struggling against flash floods and killer droughts, the Wolfe family returned to Ohio. It was tough being a cowboy in the desert. There were few roads, so everything was done on horseback. The cowboy's boots were not made for walking, but for staying in the saddle for long hours, searching the vast desert and rugged canyons for strays. Spring and fall roundups were the main events of the cowboys' year, when they proved themselves in a contest against the wild weather, wild life, and several hundred stubborn cattle. A day on the trail meant a quick bite at the mobile chuck wagon before fighting dust or rain or swollen rivers to get the cattle a few miles closer to the railhead. The name cowboy was popularized during the 1870s by the pulp fiction writers of the day, who made the cowboy a national hero. In reality, the work was hard, monotonous, and dangerous, often for very little pay. It was hard to make money raising cattle in the dry canyons of the Southwest. Severe droughts were followed by harsh winters. In the blizzards of 1855, half of all the cattle in Utah perished. Those that survived were often stolen. Local tribes took cattle as a replacement for the wildlife which had been displaced by the ranchers' herds. Cattle rustling was a persistent problem throughout the 19th century. And for some cowboys, it was an easy step from rustling to robbery. The wild lands around Arches National Park were the perfect hideout for the most notorious criminals of the century. Robert Leroy Parker was better known by his alias, Butch Cassidy. At a time when there were plenty of rough, bad-tempered bandits, Butch Cassidy was charming, cool, and clever. Cassidy's gang dubbed themselves the Wild Bunch and was a motley collection of notorious Western outlaws, including Harry Longabaugh, the Sundance Kid. Together, they carried out the longest sequence of successful bank and train robberies in the history of the American West. The Wild Bunch was born in a maze of tangled rocks near Arches National Park. Easily defended and difficult to navigate without detection, it became known as Robber's Roost. Cassidy and the gang constructed cabins inside Robber's Roost to help shield them from harsh winters and that store weapons, horses, chickens, and cattle. The authorities, despite sporadic attempts and many boastful claims, never successfully penetrated Robber's Roost. Over the years, the refuge gained a reputation of being impregnable. Butch Cassidy planned a number of holdups in Robber's Roost. He stole over $20,000 from one bank. A good haul in the days when a lonesome cowboy worked for $1 a day. Cassidy and his gang used an ingenious scheme to evade pursuing posses. They traveled fast, but constantly changing their strong, well-trained horses, strategically stored at hideouts along the trail. The daring robberies made Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch both notorious outlaws and beloved folk heroes. Even today, Western outlaws are still romantic figures. In a way, Butch Cassidy captured the essence of a land that is still wild. The first settlers wrote of the natural beauty of the landscape. But back then, the wilderness was a place to fear and avoid. A blank spot on the map, home only to wild animals, outlaws, and outcasts. But wilderness is a state of mind. Today, the red desert remains unchanged. But gone are the days of traveling with fear, cold, and hunger. In a world where technology thrusts relentlessly into the future, some people long to breathe clean air, alone in a rugged country.
On 3Net. Journey to the farthest reaches of our world and beyond for a 3D experience like no other. From the endless mysteries of space to the teeming life and stunning diversity of our oceans, travel to the final frontiers of human exploration and witness the marvels of our world in a way you've never seen before. Prepare to be transported to the exotic, the unique, the distant, and the amazing. Explore the wonders of our universe that exist far above the Earth and far below its surface. Above and Below, Mondays starting at 8, only on 3Net.
In the late 1960s, A new generation of Americans with a growing awareness of ecology and conservation went in search of real wilderness. Many found it in the isolation of Arches National Park. Here was a land stark and raw, seemingly untouched by civilization. Here was a land where only the strong survived. The plants and animals of the desert were highly specialized to survive the extreme heat and lack of water beneath the barren rock of the soaring arches. All the plants have one thing in common. They're tenacious. Their roots will split rocks in search of nutrients, and many can live for centuries. Grasses grow in scattered clumps, reducing competition for limited soil nutrients and water. During extreme droughts, the grasses simply shut down, becoming dormant until the next rain arrives. But it's the desert's gnarled and twisted trees that epitomize the struggle of life with little water. In times of drought, a juniper tree will actually stop the flow of fluids to outer branches, killing them so the tree has a better chance of survival. Each year, only about 10 inches of rain fall in Arches National Park. But the storms are often short and violent, and the water drains quickly from the barren sandstone. The juniper withstands droughts that kill other plants and trees because it has a taproot that can penetrate 25 feet straight down in search of water. Even so, junipers grow very slowly. A tree only 5 feet tall may be 50 years old and live to be more than 1,000. The trees in this desert appear as tough and contorted as the rocks themselves. But just like the landscape, the plants are fragile, always teetering on the edge of disaster. Visitors come to the Green River Overlook to admire the magnificent view of a desert wilderness. But there is another way to explore the area. The desert around Arches National Park is said to have the greatest mountain biking on the planet. The Slick Rock Trail is one of the most popular mountain bike rides in the world. The majority of the Slick Rock Trail runs over smooth, weathered sandstone. It's not slick at all, but has a surface much like sandpaper. The cowboys called it Slick Rock because it was a nightmare for horses wearing iron shoes. It was like riding on ice, especially when wet. More than a few crafty old cattle learned to head for the Slick Rock when the cowboys came to rope and brand. Nobody with any sense would ride a horse on the smooth rock. But the traction between sandstone and fat rubber tires allows riders to seemingly defy gravity. Every serious mountain biker in the world knows of the Slick Rock Trail. Technically, it's rated as very difficult to extremely dangerous. Physically, it's described as very difficult to abusive. But most find the risks are far outweighed by the opportunity to pedal through an extraordinary landscape. However, the increase in the arch's popularity brings new dangers into the national park. The Slick Rock may be hard, but the desert is fragile. A single stray wheel track or misplaced footprint can cause damage that takes more than a century to repair. That's all because in the desert, the soils are alive.
Mondays on 3Net. Journey to the farthest reaches of our world and beyond for a 3D experience like no other. From the endless mysteries of space to the teeming life and stunning diversity of our oceans, travel to the final frontiers of human exploration and witness the marvels of our world in a way you've never seen before. Prepare to be transported to the exotic, the unique, the distant, and the amazing. Explore the wonders of our universe that exist far above the Earth and far below its surface. Above and Below, Mondays starting at 8, only on 3Net.
Most visitors explore Arches National Park in a car. It's a comfortable and safe way to see big rock sculptures. But some of the strangest structures in the park are microscopic. Dirt in the desert is alive, forming a thick, knobby crust full of bacteria, algae, lichens, and mosses. This living layer of soil is even more fragile than the balancing rocks towering overhead. The crusts play a vital role in binding the desert together, trapping soil in an intricate webbing of fibers, stabilizing sand, and slowing erosion. The living soil is extremely delicate. The footprints of a clumsy visitor cause damage that may take a century for slow-growing species to repair. Arches National Park is a paradox. The rugged red rock has endured for millions of years. And yet, this is an extremely fragile land. Although Arches National Park appears harsh and unchanging, the desert ecosystem is continually evolving. Weather, climatic shifts, and geological processes continue to shape the environment, as they have for millennia. In this spectacular but unforgiving land, nothing lasts forever. Even the arches are temporary structures. Since 1970, 43 of the park's arches have collapsed. Others could fall tomorrow, or may remain standing for another 1,000 years in this constantly changing landscape. It's been nearly 150 years since the one-armed war hero John Wesley Powell first conquered the Colorado. The land, the river, and the people are now very different. Powell proved how water created this incredible landscape. And water will be its destroyer. The dramatic land looks timeless and indestructible. It took millions of years to create such beauty. Millions more will see it eroded to dust. The fragile sculptures carved from this red rock are a magnificent symbol of the impermanence of nature in one of America's most spectacular national parks.
On 3Net. Journey to the farthest reaches of our world and beyond for a 3D experience like no other. From the endless mysteries of space to the teeming life and stunning diversity of our oceans, Travel to the final frontiers of human exploration and witness the marvels of our world in a way you've never seen before. Prepare to be transported to the exotic, the unique, the distant, and the amazing. Explore the wonders of our universe that exist far above the Earth and far below its surface. Above and below, Mondays.